In this video, I show how I create a do-it-myself awning for my car setup. Most of the materials are very inexpensive, and I use an existing tarp. This is what I started with. It's a piece of electrical conduit, I believe. I think it's 1 inch outside diameter, 3/4 of an inch inside diameter. And then this is the wider part that you normally use to join two pieces of conduit together. So I made that the middle of the mounting bar so that I could slide the other piece into it. That way it lets me split the two pieces apart and I can store it more compactly in my rooftop box. Now you can see here that I've got a screw poking through, and this is what I use to mount the tarp. This is one of those plastic inside locking nuts, and I've got a washer here. And then what I did was I drilled a much bigger hole here and the correct sized hole here. Then I was able to drop this bolt through, and I could get a screwdriver in here and then a wrench in here, and that allowed me to tighten it. Plus on the inside there's a washer between the top of the bolt and the conduit as well. So I did that in 3 places, 1 at each end and 1 in the middle, because the tarp I'm using has 3 grommets. And then I was able to find these fantastic U-bolts, which came with this part. They came with nuts, but I ended up buying wing nuts instead because I find them a bit easier to use in the field, and they're a bit bigger, and they make it really quick to get on and off the roof racks. I bought a few extras as well, which I keep in a little kit in case I lose some. And the piece of hardware that I use to join the 2 pieces of conduit together is this clevis pin, I think it's called. And it lets me stick the little pin part through the bolt wherever I need to for the right height. When I first used this in my trial run, I found that because it's conduit and it's not really meant for an awning, that it was a little bit flexible when I had it set up and under tension. So what I did was I found that I had some pieces of metal here, as well as a dowel from an old towel rack. And what I did with the wooden dowel, as you can see in here, is I inserted it into the conduit, and then I remounted the bolt so that it won't fall out. And that piece of wood goes all the way to this hole, which is the first of the 2 places where the mounting bolts go in. And then here is the junction where the 2 pieces join together. So I found I had this piece of an old metal towel rack here, and what I did was I drilled a hole in it and put this bolt through it so it doesn't move relative to these 2 mounting holes, and then that will give me rigidity from here all the way to where the other piece joins on. And then likewise in here I've got another piece of a old metal towel rack, which you can see is slid forward, but this is where the other mounting bolt would go. So this will normally just slide to the right a bit, and then that will help increase the rigidity of the bar. So now I've joined the 2 pieces of conduit together here in the middle, and I find it helps to have these lines to line it up, because sometimes I misalign these mounting bolts, and 2 of them are pointing one way and one's pointing the other way, and I have to do it all over again. So I like to make sure that with these pointing up, I insert the pin this way. Then I can roll it over and insert this locking pin. Now the whole length of the bar is put together, and the tarp would mount onto these 3 things. And then when the tarp is kind of mounted on here and it's rolled over a bit, then this is nice and flat and it won't poke up through the tarp. And then I can put these 2 mounting bolts in and slide this on. And I like to keep these loose because then that way I never have to completely undo everything. I can just loosen it and then tighten it to get it onto the rack. Of course, it's hard to do when I'm holding it differently. Let's turn it upside down. There we go. And those just spin on like that. There we go. So then this bar sits on top of the roof rack, and this is where the roof rack would come through, and then I can tighten it up. So now we can mount this to the roof racks. Normally I'd use slightly longer roof racks, and these are my shortest ones, and I'm actually doing this on not my car. So if you mount it on in front of the feet of the roof rack, then you don't ever have to undo any of the wing nuts. You can just loosen them and slide the mounting point over this. But for this example, I moved it back to the other side of the feet here, and then it just becomes a simple matter of tightening up the wing nuts. Tighten them up like this. And you can see that's on quite sturdily now. And the nice thing about having different options for the position of the rack is that if I have it where it is now, when I put the tarp on, camera off, it's going to overlap this part of the roof a lot, so I won't have any gaps, allowing rain to come in between where I've mounted it. For example, here, the tarp would only go to here, and so I might get rain coming down inside my door. But if I mount it a little bit further back, then all this is going to be protected by the tarp, so there's no chance that rain's going to come in when I want to get in the car. And then having this set up like this, I made it so that these mounting bolts are angled back so that the tarp goes on and it wraps around a little bit, and that helps keep it on without having to use any wing nuts, which I do use wing nuts on there. So now when I want to mount the tarp onto the bar, I just slide my grommets onto these screws, and you can see how it wraps around slightly, and that helps ensure that I don't have a gap at my mounting points. This shows the tarp on all three mounting points. And if I wanted extra security to make sure that the tarp stays on here, I've got these wing nuts that I can put on to keep it in place. This shows the tarp fully set up. I spared you the anguish of watching me do that, though it's pretty quick. You can use any number of poles. Here I've just used 2, and I could put the poles on the middle grommets if I wanted to, or I could have them on the end grommets, depending on the effect that I want. I can raise the poles up higher than the level of the door to give me more space. You can see how that nicely covers most of the front door, all of the back door, which theoretically is where you're getting in and out of if you're sleeping in your car or getting things out. And it goes all the way to the back door of this car. I've also found that it makes it a bit more stable if I put 2 guy lines on here, which I've only done 1 right now. But it's a fairly quick and easy and adaptable setup. All that I need to have is to make sure that the roof rack spacing is set up according to where I've got my 2 U-bolts, because as I said, this is not even my car. And so theoretically, if you have the ability to change the mounting distance of your roof racks, you could put this on almost any car. And this is the view of it mounted on the roof. I've only used 1 wing nut, and that's on the far right. The other 2 locations don't have wing nuts, but I could put them on if I wanted to. And this is how it looks kind of from below. So there's lots of room under there, and the poles can be raised lower or higher, as I said. Sometimes it's nice to have the end of the tarp lowered so you get a bit of privacy or shelter from the wind. But the configuration is very flexible and can be set up according to whatever needs you have, or the privacy or the conditions. This is how compact everything gets. So the bars and the mounting poles and the tarp poles fit nicely into my cargo box, and the tarp fits into this 5-liter bag, and that little container beside the tarp is just all the extra hardware that I have. This gives me flexibility to have the tarp set up completely independently of my car. I can use a ridgeline if I want, which is also in this tarp bag, and set it up without being attached to the car. Something else I forgot to mention when I was showing you the building of the bar was that the 3 mounting points here are set up so that they match the 3 grommet holes in my tarp. So depending on the kind of tarp you have, the spacing is going to be unique to your tarp.